Voting behavior. Meaning of voting behavior.
Behavior is also
known as electoral behavior. It is a form of political behavior. It implies the behavior of voters in the context of elections in a democratic political system. Voting behavior, or the study of voting behavior, is defined in the following way. Plano and Riggs. Voting behavior is a field of study concerned with the ways in which people tend to vote in public elections and the reasons why they vote as they do. Gordon Marshall. The study of voting behavior invariably focuses on the determinants of why people vote as they do and how they arrive at the decisions they make. 1 Oenam Kulabigo. Voting behavior may be defined as the behavior that explicitly reflects voters' choices, preferences, alternatives, ideologies, concerns, agreements, and programs in respect of various issues, questions pertaining to the society and nation. 2 Stephen Wasby. The study of voting behavior involves an analysis of individual psychological makeup and their relation to political action as well as institutional patterns, such as the communication process and their impact on elections. 3. Significance of voting behavior. Psicology, a branch of political science, deals with the scientific study of voting behavior. This is a new term popularized by the American political scientists and political sociologists. The recorded history of voting goes back, at least, to the Greek polis. The modern word for the study of voting behavior, spology, derives from the classical Greek, spos, the piece of pottery on which certain votes, mainly about the banishment of those seen as dangerous to the state, were inscribed. 4 The study of voting behavior is significant for the following reasons. 5.1. It helps in comprehending the process of political socialization. 2. It helps in examining the internalization of democracy as a value among the elite as well as masses. 3. It emphasizes the real impact of revolutionary ballot box. 4. It enables to throw light as to how far the electoral politics continue or break with the past. 5. It helps to measure whether it is modern or primordial in the context of political development. According to N.G.S. Keeney, voting behavior can be regarded as 1. A mode of legitimizing democratic rule, 2. Instancing, participation, in the political process involving integration into the political community, 3. Instancing an act of decision-making, 4. A role action involving definite political orientation embedded in a particular type of political culture, or 5. A direct relation of the individual citizens to the formal government. Determinants of voting behavior. Indian society is highly diversified in nature and composition. Hence, voting behavior in India is determined or influenced by multiple factors. These several factors can be divided into two broad categories, namely, socio-economic factors and political factors. These are explained below. 1. Caste. Caste is an important factor influencing the behavior of voters. Politicization of caste and casteism in politics has been a remarkable feature of Indian politics. Rajni Kothare said, Indian politics is casteist, and caste is politicized. 6. While formulating their election strategies, the political parties always take into account the factor of caste. Paul Brass has very well explained the role of caste factor in the Indian voting behavior in the following way. At the local level, in the countryside, by far the most important factor in voting behavior remains caste solidarity. Large and important castes in a constituency tend to back either a respected member of their caste or a political party with whom their caste members identify. However, local factions and local state factional alignments that involve inter-caste coalitions are also important factors in influencing voting behavior. 7.2. Religion. Religion is another significant factor which influences the electoral behavior. Political parties indulge in communal propaganda and exploit the religious sentiments of the voters. The existence of various communal parties has further added to the politicization of religion. Despite India being a secular nation, no political party ignores the influence of religion in electoral politics. 3. Language. Linguistic considerations of the people influence their voting behavior. During elections, The political parties arouse the linguistic feelings of the people and try to influence their decision-making. The reorganization of states, in 1956 and later, on language basis clearly reflects the significance of language factor in Indian politics. The rise of some political parties like DMK in Tamil Nadu and TDP in Andhra Pradesh can be attributed to the linguism. 84. Region, regionalism and sub-regionalism play an important role in voting behavior. These parochial feelings of subnationalism led to the emergence and perpetuation of regional parties in various states. These regional parties appeal to the electorate on the ground of regional identities and regional sentiments. Sometimes, the secessionist parties call for the boycott of elections. 5. Personality. The charismatic non-personality of the party leader plays an important role in electoral behavior. Thus, the towering image of Jawaharlal Nehru, Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, Jai Prakash Narayan, Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Narendra Modi has significantly influenced the
electorate to vote in favor of their
parties. Similarly, at the state level also, the charismatic personality of the regional party leader has been a significant factor of popular support in the elections. 6. Money. The role of money factor cannot be overlooked in explaining the voting behavior. Despite the limitations on the election expenditures, crores of rupees are spent on elections. The voters seek money or liquor or goods in return for their votes. In other words, votes are freely exchanged for notes. However, money can influence the decisions of the voters only in the normal circumstances and not in a wave election. Paul Brass has very well explained the meaning of a wave election in the following way. A wave election is one in which a clear tendency begins to develop among the electorate in a single direction and in favor of a national party or its leader. It is based upon an issue or set of issues that transcend local calculations and coalition and draws the bulk of the uncommitted and wavering voters in the same direction as the word spreads from village to village and tea stall to tea stall. 10.7. Performance of the ruling party. On the eve of elections, every political party releases its election manifesto containing the promises made by it to the electorate. The performance of the ruling party is judged by the electorate on the basis of its election manifesto. The defeat of Congress Party in 1977 elections and that of Janata Party in 1980 elections illustrates that the performance of the ruling party influences the voting behavior. Thus, the anti-incumbency factor, which means dissatisfaction with the performance of the ruling party, is a determinant of electoral behavior. 8. Party identification. Personal and emotional association with political parties plays a role in determining voting behavior. People who identify themselves with a particular party will always vote for that party irrespective of its omissions and commissions. Party identification was especially strong in the 1950s and 1960s. However, since the 1970s there has been a decline in the number of strong party identifiers. 9. Ideology. The political ideology professed by a political party has a bearing on the decision-making of the voters. Some people in the society are committed to certain ideologies like communism, capitalism, democracy, secularism, patriotism, decentralization and so on. Such
people generally support the candidates put up by the parties professing those ideologies.
However, it must be printed out here that the number of such people is low. 10. Other factors. In addition to the above explained factors, there are also various other factors which determine the voting behavior of the Indian electorate. These are mentioned below. I. Political events preceding an election like war, murder of a leader, corruption scandals, etc. 2. Economic conditions at the time of election like inflation, food shortage, unemployment, etc. 3. Factionalism, a feature of Indian politics from bottom to top levels. 4. Age old or young, we, sex men or women. 6. Education, educated or uneducated. 7. Habitation, rural or urban. 8. Class, income, rich or poor. 9. Family and kinship, kissed smiley candidate. Orientation. 11. Election campaign. 12. political family background. 13. Role of media in elections and voting behavior. The following points explain the role of media in elections and voting behavior. 11.1. Information dissemination in relation to elections, particularly during the process of elections, is extremely important for all stakeholders. Starting from the announcement of elections to nomination, scrutiny, campaign, security arrangements, polling, counting, declaration of results, etc., all of these require widest circulation. The voter comes to know about the basics like what, when, where and how of elections generally through the media. Even last-minute changes of polling arrangements, violation of Model Code of
Conduct, MCC, and violation of expenditure instructions.
Any untoward incidents or disturbances promptly come to the notice not only of the people but also of the Election Commission through the media. Newspapers and news channels have very enthusiastically made use of the information relating to educational, financial and criminal antecedents of candidates, contained in the affidavit filed by them along with their nomination paper, which is immediately uploaded on the Election Commission's website. This has contributed to further honesty and transparency in the election system. To enforcement of MCC and other laws in today's democratic and political landscape, the watchdog role of the media
is quite vital.
Media can highlight incidents of use of muscle and money power by political parties or candidates and educate the electors on ethical and inducement-free voting practices. It can also expose violations of the MCC such as divisive or hate speeches or unverified allegations in campaigns aimed at influencing electors. Violations reported by media are followed up by the Election Commission as in dealing with formal complaints. The media can sensitize the political functionaries and the electorate about the MCC and relevant laws and instructions governing the conduct of elections. 3. Compliance to election laws. The Election Commission does not regulate media. It has, however, the responsibility to enforce the provisions of law or court directions, which might have linkages with media or certain aspects of media functioning. During elections, media is present and active at all stages, which would also mean that they too conform to various laws governing the elections. These laws are mentioned below. I. Section 126 of the Representation of the People Act, 1951. It prohibits conduct of exit poll and dissemination of their results during the period mentioned therein, i.e., they are fixed for commencement of polls in the first phase and half hour after the time fixed for close of poll for the last phase in all the states and union territories. 2. Section 126 of the Representation of the People Act, 1951. It prohibits displaying any election matter by means of cinematograph, television or other similar apparatus, during the period of 48 hours ending with the hour fixed for conclusion of poll. 3. Section 127 of the Representation of the People Act, 1951. The printing and publication of election pamphlets, posters, etc. is governed by its provisions, which make it mandatory to bear on its face the names and addresses of the printer and the publisher. 4. Section 171H of the Indian Penal Code, it prohibits incurring of expenditure on, inter alia, advertisement without the authority of the contesting candidate. For voter education and participation, there is scope for a much larger and committed partnership from media in the crucial area of voter awareness and participation. This is one of the most promising areas of the Election Commission media relationship. There is a gap between what the voters should know and what they actually know in important areas like registration, epic identity proofs, polling station location, use of EVMs, timings of the poll, use of money muscle power by candidates, etc. The elector should be well informed when he/she goes to exercise his/her franchise on the day of the polls. Voter education helps build an environment where values of democracy are understood and acted upon by the population. Media and civil society have an important role to play in fostering such an environment. To improve participation of all sections of the electorate, awareness levels need to be enhanced, especially amongst the freshly eligible youth, uneducated, residents of far-flung, inaccessible and remote areas, and socially and economically weaker sections of the society. Such segments need to be reached through the media, apart from civil society and field-based organizations. The Election Commission has in place a framework of engagement for collaboration between the Commission and media houses organizations in this important area of voter participation. The Election
Commission expects that the media should
volunteer to take up this task of informing, motivating and facilitating citizens to take part in the democratic elections. 5. Responsibility of government media in broadcast of election-related news or analysis. Public service broadcasters are expected to lead by example in terms of neutrality and objectivity, and adhere to various guidelines including their own. The Election Commission has a fruitful arrangement with Prasar Bharati in providing free broadcast time on All India Radio and Doordarshan to recognize national and state parties so as to ensure a level playing field in elections. The political parties in this manner can reach out to every corner of the country, even in the remotest parts. In addition to this, Prasar Bharati's contribution in spreading voter awareness and educating the public about their voting rights and responsibilities is of great consequence to the inclusion of all in the electoral process. The contribution of Prasar Bharati has come in good measure in this arena. The Election Commission also urges PIB, DEV, National Film Development Corporation, Directorate of Field Publicity, Song and Drama Division and many other central and state information directorates departments to come forward and shoulder the same responsibility. Notes and references 1. Gordon Marshall, Oxford Dictionary of Sociology, 1st Indian edition, 2004, p.696. 2. Oinam Kulabidu, Electoral Politics in Manipur, 19801995, unpublished PhD thesis submitted to the Manipur University, 1998. 3. Stephen L. Wafi, Political Science, The Discipline and Its Dimensions, 1972, Scientific Book Agency, Calcutta, p.308. 4. David Robertson, The Penguin Dictionary of Politics, 2nd edition, 1993, p.485. 5. K.R. Acharya, ed. Perspectives on Indian Government and Politics, 2nd edition, 1991, S. Chand and Company Limited, p.403. 6. Caste in Indian Politics and Politics in India are the two major
contributions of Rajni Kothari
to the study of Indian politics. 7. Paul R. Brass, The Politics of India Since Independence, 2nd edition, Cambridge University Press, pp.
97-98.
8. Linguism means love for one's language and hatred towards other language-speaking people. 9. Charisma means exceptional and attractive qualities of a leader. 10. Paul R. Brass, The 1984 Parliamentary Elections in Uttar Pradesh, Asian Survey, June, 1986. 11. Handbook for Media 2014, Election Commission of India, pp.1417.
Election Laws
Representation of the People Act, 1950. Articles 81 and 170 of the Constitution of India lay down the maximum number of seats in Parliament and in legislative assemblies of states and also certain principles to be followed in allocating seats in the House of People among the states and in the state legislative assemblies, but have left the actual allocation of such seats to be provided by the law. Similarly, Article 171 of the Constitution of India lays down the maximum and minimum number of seats in the Legislative Council of a state, and also specify the various methods in which the seats shall be filled, but the actual number of seats to be filled by each such method has been left to be provided by law. Therefore, the Representation of the People Act, 1950, was enacted to provide for the allocation of seats in the House of the People and in the legislative assemblies and legislative councils of states. In allotting seats in the House of the People to different states and in fixing the total number of seats in the legislative assemblies of different states, the population of each state as on 1st March 1950 was taken into account. The Act also sought to confer on the President the powers to delimit, after consultation with the Election Commission, the various constituencies for the purpose of elections to fill seats in the House of the People and in the
legislative assemblies
and legislative councils of states. The Act further provided for the registration of electors for parliamentary constituencies and for the assembly
and council constituencies,
and the qualifications and disqualifications for such registration. A special provision has been included for relaxation of the residence qualification in the case of displaced persons who migrated before the 25th day of July, 1949, to India from the territory of Pakistan. The provisions have been made for the preparation of electoral rolls, the period of currency of such rolls, and the revision and connection of such rolls during such period in special cases. Certain action was already taken by the Constituent Assembly Secretariat for the preparation of the electoral rolls for elections to the House of the People and the legislative assemblies of the states. A provision has accordingly been included in the Act for the validation of such acts. Table 70.1 Representation of the People Act, 1950. At a glance, parts subject matter sections covered 1I preliminary 122 allocation of seats and delimitation of constituencies 313 IIA officers 13A 13cc IIB electoral rolls for parliamentary constituencies 13D3 electoral rolls for assembly constituencies 1425A4 electoral rolls for council constituencies 2627 IVA manner of filling seats in the Council of States to be filled by representatives of Union Territories 27A27 KV. General 2832.
Table 70.2
Schedules of the Representation of the People Act, 1950. At a glance, numbers subject matter. First schedule allocation of seats in the House of the People. Second schedule total number of seats in
the legislative assemblies.
Third schedule allocation of seats in the legislative councils. Fourth schedule local authorities for purposes of elections to legislative councils. Fifth schedule repealed. Sixth schedule repealed. Seventh repealed. Schedule Representation of the People Act, 1951. The Representation of the People Act, 1950 did not contain all the provisions relating to elections but merely provided for the allocation of seats in and the delimitation of constituencies for the purpose of elections to the House of People and legislatures of states, the qualifications of voter at such election and the preparations of electoral rolls. The provisions for the actual conduct of elections to the Houses of Parliament and to the House or Houses of the legislature of each state, the qualifications and disqualifications for the membership of these houses, the corrupt practices and other election offences, and the decision of election disputes were all left to be made in a subsequent measure. In order to provide for these provisions, the Representation of the People Act, 1951 was enacted. Broadly speaking, this Act contains provisions relating to the following electoral matters: 1. Qualifications and disqualifications for membership of Parliament and
state legislatures. 2.
Notification of general elections. 3. Administrative machinery for the conduct of elections. 4. Registration of political parties. 5. Conduct of elections. 6. Free supply of certain material to candidates of recognized political parties. 7. Disputes regarding elections. 8. Corrupt practices and electoral offences. Table 70.3 Representation of the People Act, 1951. At a glance, parts subject matter sections covered 2I preliminary 122 qualifications and disqualifications, 311b3 notification of general elections, 1218-4 administrative machinery for the conduct of elections, 1929 IVA registration of political parties, 29A29CV conduct of elections, 3078 were free supply of certain material to candidates of recognized political parties, 78A78B6 disputes regarding elections, 79-1227 corrupt practices and electoral offences, 1231388 disqualifications, 139146C9 by-elections, 147151AX miscellaneous, 15216811 general, 169171.
Delimitation Act,
2002 Articles 82 and 170 of the Constitution of India provide for readjustment and the division of each state into territorial constituencies, parliamentary constituencies and assembly constituencies, on the basis of the 2001 census by such authority and in such manner as Parliament may, by law, determine. Further, Articles 330 and 332 of the Constitution of India provide for refixing the number of seats reserved for the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes in the House of the People and legislative assemblies of the states on the basis of the 2001 census. Representation of the People Act, 1951. The Representation of the People Act, 1950 did not contain all the provisions relating to elections but merely provided for the allocation of seats and the delimitation of constituencies for the purpose of elections to the House of People and legislatures of states, the qualifications of voter at such election and the preparations of electoral rolls. The provisions for the actual conduct of elections to the Houses of Parliament and to the House or Houses of the legislature of each state, the qualifications and disqualifications for the membership of these houses, the corrupt practices and other election offences, and the decision of election disputes were all left to be made in a subsequent measure. In order to provide for these provisions, the Representation of the People Act, 1951 was enacted. Broadly speaking, this act contains provisions relating to the following electoral matters: 1. Qualifications and disqualifications for membership of Parliament and
State legislatures.
2. Notification of general elections. 3. Administrative machinery for the conduct of elections. 4. Registration of political parties. 5. Conduct of elections. 6. Free supply of certain material to candidates of recognized political parties. 7. Disputes regarding elections. 8. Corrupt practices and electoral offences. Table 70.3 Representation of the People Act, 1951. At a glance, parts subject matter sections cover 2I preliminary 1 to 2 qualifications and disqualifications 311
3
notification of general elections 1218 4 administrative machinery for the conduct of elections 1929 IBA registration of political parties 29A 29 CV conduct of elections 3078 were free supply of certain material to candidates of recognized political parties 78A 78B 6 disputes regarding elections 79 1227 corrupt practices and electoral offences 1231388 disqualifications 139146 C9 by-elections 147151 AX miscellaneous 15216 general 169171
Delimitation
Act 2002 Articles 82 and 170 of the Constitution of India provide for readjustment and the division of each state into territorial constituencies, parliamentary constituencies and assembly constituencies, on the basis of the 2001 census by such authority and in such manner as Parliament may, by law, determine. Further, Articles 330 and 332 of the Constitution of India provide for refixing the number of seats reserved for the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes in the House of the People and legislative assemblies of the states on the basis of the 2001 census. The present delimitation of parliamentary and assembly constituencies is based on the 1971 census. The uneven growth of population in different constituencies in different parts of the country as well as within the same state, as also continuous migration of people electorate from one place to other, especially from rural areas to urban areas, have resulted in strikingly differing sizes of electoral constituencies even within the same state. Therefore, the Delimitation Act, 2023, was enacted to set up a delimitation commission for the purpose of effecting delimitation on the basis of the 2001 census so as to correct the aforesaid distortion in the sizes of electoral constituencies. The proposed delimitation commission would also refix the number of seats for the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes on the basis of the 2001 census, without affecting total number of seats based on the 1971 census. The Act sought to lay down certain guidelines as to the manner in which such delimitation would be undertaken. In the Act, the new Delimitation Commission was given the task of carrying out delimitation of parliamentary and assembly constituencies. It had been specifically provided that the Delimitation Commission shall endeavour to complete the work within a period not later than July 31, 2008.4. The proposed delimitation would apply to every general election to the House of the People or to a state legislative assembly held after the final orders of the Commission are published, and to every by-election arising from such general election.
Table
70.4 Delimitation Act, 2002, 5 at a glance. Sections. Subject Matter 1. Short Title 2. Definitions 3. Constitution of Delimitation Commission 4. Duties of the Commission 5. Associate Members 6. Casual Vacancies 7. Procedure and Powers of the Commission 8. Readjustment of Number of Seats 9. Delimitation of Constituencies 10. Publication of Orders and their date of operation 10a. Deferment of delimitation in certain cases 10b. Delimitation Commission's order with respect to the state of Jharkhand not to have any legal effect 11. Power to maintain delimitation orders up to date 12. Repeal other acts relating to elections 1. Parliament, Prevention of Disqualification, Act, 19,596 declares that certain offices of profit under the government shall not disqualify the holders thereof for being chosen as, or for being, members of Parliament. 2. Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Orders, Amendment, Act, 1976 provides for the inclusion in, and the exclusion from, the lists of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, of certain castes and tribes, for the readjustment of representation of parliamentary and assembly. Constituencies. 3. Government of Union Territories Act, 1963. 4. Government of National Capital Territory of Delhi Act, 1991. 5. Presidential and Vice Presidential Elections Act, 19,527 regulates certain matters relating to or connected with elections to the offices of the President and Vice President of India. Rules relating to elections 1. Registration of Electors Rules, 19,608 provide for the preparation and publication of electoral rolls. 2. Conduct of Elections Rules, 19,619 facilitates conduct of fair and free elections to the Parliament and state legislatures. 3. Prohibition of Simultaneous Membership Rules, 1950. 4. Members of Lok Sabha, Disqualification on Ground of Defection, Rules, 1985. 5. Members of Rajya Sabha, Disqualification on Ground of Defection, Rules, 1985. 6. Presidential and Vice Presidential Elections Rules, 1974.107. Members of Lok Sabha, Declaration of Assets and Liabilities, Rules, 2004. 8. Members of Rajya Sabha, Declaration of Assets and Liabilities, Rules, 2004. Orders relating to elections 1. Election Symbols, Reservation and Allotment, Order, 1968 provides for the specification, reservation, choice and allotment of symbols at elections in parliamentary and assembly constituencies, for the recognition of political parties in relation thereto. 2. Registration of political parties, furnishing of additional particulars, Order, 1992 provides for furnishing of additional particulars by associations or bodies of individual citizens of India seeking registration as a political party with the Election Commission of India. Notes and references 1. For the subject matter of each section of the Representation of the People Act, 1950, see Appendix 9. 2. For the subject matter of each section of the Representation of the People Act, 1951, see Appendix X3. The Delimitation Act, 2002, was amended in 2003, 2008 and 2016. For originally, the Act provided for a period of 2 years. 5 earlier, the Delimitation Acts were enacted in 1952, 1962 and 1972. 6. This Act repealed the 3 earlier Acts, namely, the Parliament, Prevention of Disqualification, Act, 1950, the Parliament, Prevention of Disqualification Act, 1951, and the Prevention of Disqualification, Parliament and Part C States Legislatures, Act, 1953. 7. This Act was amended in 1974, 1977 and 1997. 8. Earlier, the rules in this regard were made in 1950 and 1956. Both the earlier rules were known by the same nomenclature, i.e., the representation of the people, preparation of electoral rolls, rules. 9. Earlier, the rules in this regard were made in 1951 and 1956. Both the earlier rules were known by the same nomenclature, i.e., the representation of the people, conduct of elections and election petitions, rules. 10. These rules repealed the earlier presidential and vice presidential elections rules, 1952. Electoral reforms